And we'd like to start by, I think, asking you as an incumbent to describe for us what you feel the sentiment is in this community and how it feeds into this particular council race, and what the meaning of this race is and the outcome.
I'm not sure races have a meaning in terms of, exactly what it means. It's hard to say what the meaning would be. I mean, I think when you talk about the community sentiment, I think, let's see, when I ran in 2009, we talked about infrastructure, we talked about fiscal responsibility, we talked about PC zoning, we talked about high-speed rail. In 2012, whatever the economy's really taken off, parking and traffic are clearly on everyone's mind. And so that's what people are talking about in the community. And I think what people really want is they want to feel that we're addressing those issues and that we're going to, take concrete steps. And I think the parking intrusion, frankly, around the downtown and to some extent around California Avenue, those are big issues. And I think the community is looking for solutions.
There's a narrative going around in this campaign that although the council is addressing those issues now, the parking, the traffic, and the zoning, it was because the residents pushed the point, and in fact, the council had exacerbated those problems. And I'm wondering what your take is on that.
So, if you go back and look in 2012, 2011, especially 2012, you can look at the minutes of when we approved the Gateway Lytton 101 project. All I talked about was parking. And I remember in 2011 attending parking meetings, attending all of them when we talked about putting in it the first time an RPP. So it's been on my radar screen, and I've always been a strong advocate, if you look through that, for more parking garages. I've pushed that at every instance I could. So I've been focused on the parking issues. The extent of the explosion in traffic, I think, has really taken us a bit by surprise. And this is Palo Alto, and it's hard to get things done. It's hard to be transparent and open and involve all the stakeholders and get something done quickly. It's virtually impossible. So, in things like RPP, it takes a lot of time to go through the process and get everyone together. And I think we're making great progress. I mean, I fully expect to have an RPP program in place in January.
And what about the development issues, concerns that the council's taken steps to promote development that's brought on, some of the traffic problems and just the pace of development is concerned?
I don't really think that's true. I mean, I think it feels that way because you see a lot of stuff under construction. But when you actually look at the base we have of the number of square feet, and you add in the number of square feet that have been approved, and you ask yourself, how much traffic did that create? I mean, I'm not saying it didn't create some, but I would say that that's not what's going on. I mean, you look at Santa Clara County across the board, traffic is up 6 or 7% this year alone. This is the economic cycle. That's what's really happening here. We're getting a boom, and it's manifesting itself in traffic and parking. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the community doesn't feel that the development, because you do see a lot of construction around town. And when you have that feeling, you have the feeling that that's what's causing it when you're sitting there in traffic. And I too feel really frustrated. I mean, sitting on Alma, sitting on Oregon Expressway. I go to these regional meetings down in Santa Clara and Sunnyvale. Sometimes it takes you 2 hours to get there, and you're thinking, this is crazy.
Well, so is it your view that the candidates that are running as challengers, and you're criticizing this current council, are then just misunderstanding these issues, misunderstanding the council? Something has given rise to this movement, if you want to call it that, but that you've got a semi-slate of candidates running against you.
Right.
So how do you explain that?
Well, I explain it as I think it's basically the economy taking off, and you have traffic and parking, and you have the sense of that it's hard to park downtown. That's annoying. You have many more cars in people's neighborhoods. You have a hard time getting around town at times. So I think those get into it, and I think if you want a clear answer on that, I think that was galvanized by Measure D. I mean, those candidates come out of the Measure D issues. And I think that Measure D is what galvanized that. I mean, that's the simple answer.
But I sense that their view is that there are specific actions that the council either took or failed to take that requires the replacement of the council. It's not just arising out of frustration that we're in a boom economy. It's directed towards the political establishment in this community.
Yeah, and I think they're misguided on it. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to talk about specifics. It's very hard to talk and say, I mean, so, you know, should the council be replaced? Absolutely not. Do I think that, do I think there are issues with traffic and parking? Yes. Do I think we're addressing? Do I think we've moved quickly to address them? I mean, we have 14 different initiatives to address traffic and parking. I mean, I haven't heard any specifics of what we should be doing, frankly, from any of the other candidates. I've heard more that, you know, council has not done this, or in the past they weren't transparent, or that. But if you actually say, what would they do? I haven't heard anything, but happy to address it.
You raised Measure D, so maybe we should hit on that now. You were in the thick of that because you were mayor at the time,
yes.
And you so you not only presided over that debate, but you attempted to reach some sort of a compromise at the 11th hour. So and obviously you opposed the actual ballot measure. So what, in hindsight, went wrong there? What went off the rails? And
Right.
if you could do it all over again, how would you have done it differently?
Well, I would have done it completely differently. I think there's two things. I think the huge mistake I made personally was looking at the technical details rather than community sentiment. And I'll explain that a little bit more. But what I'd do differently, first of all, when the citizens came for the ballot initiative, I probably would have ended it just there and reversed the zoning at that point. And I think that was a big lesson. I think when we did the mediation, I'm not sure it would have made much difference, but it might have. I think we should have reduced another 4 houses, frankly. Brought it down to 8 rather than 12. But I think the real issue here is that, for me at least, take the 8 to 12. The Housing Corporation said they couldn't do the project with that. On a technical point of view, I do not believe, and still don't believe, that 4 houses would have made any difference in the traffic. And I think it's absurd to think it would. And what I heard from the neighbors...
In the traffic or in the financial aspect?
No, in the traffic.
Okay.
Now, funny enough, I don't know if the Housing Corporation was right on it. They said it was $1 million a house, so it would be a $4 million hit to them, is what they told us. Given where the market went, I actually think they clearly could have absorbed it. I mean, I think that's also not really in dispute. So, I mean, in hindsight, absolutely would have cut those houses out. But when you look at the traffic issues, 4 houses, I don't think would have made any difference in terms of that. I thought we worked on what the neighbors told me they wanted, which was they wanted a single-family feel around there, and they wanted to address traffic issues. And it seemed to me that the project that was proposed would have better traffic issues than what could be zoned for there. And, you know, we'll find out. I mean, it just seemed that way at the time. And so on a technical basis, I said, well, what's best for the community? Also, I think, you know, 60 affordable senior housing units is a good thing for the community. And I don't think anyone really disputes that. I did not believe that people that make less than $25,000 a year who are seniors would drive and would cause traffic problems. I just didn't see it. So my mistake really was feeling that the technical issues were right as opposed to where the community sentiment was. And I wouldn't make that mistake again.
One of the underlying themes of the neighborhood, or some people in the neighborhood, was a sense of feeling disrespected in the way they were approached by the city, not necessarily the council, but the whole process of engagement that took place there. And given all the prior history of concerns about traffic and the Arastradero narrowing and, you know, everything that had happened in Maybell as a result, and the transportation department, and all those frustrations had built up and sort of came to a head. How much is that a legitimate characterization, do you think, of the way the city came across to that neighborhood?
You know, I think it's legitimate. And I'll tell you why I think it's legitimate, because they felt that way. And if they feel that way, there's some legitimacy to it. I I think the whole Arastadero thing is something that's really interesting to me. That wasn't really on my radar screen as an issue until Maybell, frankly. Whenever it comes to council, and that was all decided prior to me getting on council, but there's been a few times when it's come up at council and there has been no one in the chambers except Penny Ellison talking about safe routes to schools. But when you talk to people, there is a huge frustration about the Arastadero issue, and I definitely think that fed into it. And I think that whole issue is unfortunate.
There was another project that stirred up quite a bit of community angst, which was the J. Paul. And for a number of different reasons. I mean, in the end, they were talking about traffic, but the expediting or the scheduling of the project to get to the council with one review by PTC, one by ARB, was looked upon as a transparency issue as well. And I'm wondering, I understand that the public safety building was a huge carrot at the time, but I'm wondering if there's anything that you learned from that experience, or if you do anything differently.
Well, I think there's this tension, and I think we have to recognize it. If you wanted to put a ballot measure on the ballot, we needed to understand, are we going to go that route or are we going to go a different route? And so you need to get the stuff moving forward, but on the other hand, you have to engage the stakeholders. So I think there was a misunderstanding as to that. No one told the PTC they could only have one meeting on it or whatever. What was said was, let's try and get this stuff scheduled and get it going so we get a sense of where we get to in this process. And I don't think anything was lost in the process. I think that it became clear where the traffic study was going to be, and it clearly wasn't going to work on the J. Paul site. It was not worth it given the traffic conditions. And I think that's where council would have come out if they hadn't withdrawn their application.
So you think the efficiency in that case was worth?
So I think that you're taking it as council said, let's have these meetings quickly. What was actually said was, let's get these scheduled and let's try and cut out any unnecessary time gaps, not meetings, but time gaps. Let's make this a priority to get the stuff scheduled on the thing. Let's do that. Let's not go ahead and try and, just let it drift, because we need to get this moving forward.
I'm pretty sure the words fast track were used.
Well, they may have been, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we were going to cut out public hearings. And I think that was said at the time. I remember it being said at the time, frankly, that we weren't going to cut out any public meetings. We were going to have the exact number of meetings. What we didn't want is look at this stuff. Sometimes staff schedules things 6 months later. This was directed at staff to get them to put the stuff on the agenda. It's a funny thing. You need to direct staff sometimes to say, we want this to come forward in a timely manner. And that's what we were doing.
Okay, I was going to say, but given the size of the project, do you think that was a wise move, given that it was 300,000 square feet and it was already built out to the max? I mean, isn't that the kind of project that perhaps...
No, look, I think it needs a full vetting. I mean, no question. And there was no intention to not have it have a full vetting. And I didn't think the two were incompatible, frankly, with telling staff that we wanted to have this on the agenda and agendized quickly, as opposed to, drifting. It's that simple.
Okay, my recollection is that Klein was saying that there's no need particularly for 2 meetings at each commission, and that would imply that if there's no need for 2 meetings, that perhaps you're looking for one.
But there was no argument that, my recollection is different, but my recollection is that you don't have to have 2 meetings possibly, but if you need 2 meetings, you'll have, and I remember people saying, well, wait a minute, if you need to have the meetings, have them, but let's not just automatically have meetings if you don't need to have the meeting.
You raised the 101 Lytton project, and that gives us an entree to talking about PC projects and
Yes.
a variety of other things. So I guess you were vice mayor when that project came before the council in
Yes, I was.
2012. You supported that project after it got amended as a PC. You made comments that the design and significance of that parcel and that building itself were part of the public benefit under the PC requirements. And for the first time ever, as far as I know, the public benefits for that project amounted almost entirely of money paid to the city. not any benefits that were inherent to the project, with the exception of some electric charging car stations and that kind of thing. I wonder if you can explain your thinking in that, and how it ties into your overall view of the planned community zone and how it works in this city.
Okay, so that was the first PC project that came to us in 2012. Prior to that, we basically had a recession focused on other things. The PC of that is really interesting in that, first of all, I disagree with your characterization of cash, by the way. There's about $6.5 million of public benefits in that project. There are new streetlights, there are new bunch of trees, there's bulb outs, there's lots of intrinsic stuff to make the pedestrian feel, and there's bike amenities as well in there. I'm doing this off the top of my head, so it's not necessarily as easy. And then there is $2 million towards a new parking garage. That's not really, it's cash, but it's not cash. It's cash that's solely designated for a new parking garage. And that is a public benefit. The other thing the project did is it had 40 attendant parking spaces, and they only got credit for 10. So the project is fully parked. There is not a single car that would be added that would not be parked. There are also 16 parking spaces that are open on the evenings and weekends to the public all the time, and there are 8 retail parking spaces that are open all the time. There's a whole bunch of charging stations, including a level 3 charging station. There's 2 on the Alma side. There's several in the interior courtyard. And there was $625,000 given to the Affordable Housing Fund. So if you look at that, I would say that of all the PC projects that have been approved that I'm aware of this had the most public benefits, and it had real public benefits, as opposed to like a windswept plaza that is now a restaurant, or frankly a supermarket, so this had real public benefits. So the other thing the project was fully parked, and it also had a 20% TDM with teeth. I don't know if you recognize that. And so we put it right next to the train station, and we said, here, you also need to reduce traffic and solar vehicle trips by 20%. And there are going to be teeth and fines if you don't do it. And that's built into it. So it allowed us to actually do those kind of things. So I thought it actually was a good use of the PC process. Now, when I said the building itself, I was either very inarticulate that night, which is quite possible. It's late when we do this. What was meant by that was when you do a PC, you should say to yourself, is the building good for Palo Alto? All the public benefits in the world would not justify doing a project that shouldn't be done. And what I was trying to say was this is right next to the train station. Everyone knows when you look at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and that is an office building next to a train station is the most efficient use of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, getting people out of their cars and getting people to take public transit. And if you're going to build more office space in Palo Alto, this is the best location of anywhere in Palo Alto to build it. And so that's what I meant by that this is a good place for that office building.
Well, there would have been an office building there regardless.
Well,
you just allowed them to go 3 times what the zoning would have permitted.
So I don't think that's true. My recollection of it is that there is, I don't really mean to be combative on it, but my recollection of it is that the parcel was split into 2 zones, neighborhood commercial and regional commercial. If the project was zoned total regional commercial, it would have been a 50,000 square foot building you could have built there under the zoning.
Right, but it wasn't.
But it was zoned half and half. If it was zoned, the split zoning, you were allowed to build 30,000, was my understanding of the 2 together. And you're saying no. But that was...
My understanding was 18,000.
So, I don't have it in front of me. But that's my recollection. And I actually thought that if you zoned it the other way, then maybe you get to that. So a 17,000
There was never any doubt in your mind that there would have been a building put on that parcel regardless, right?
Yeah, but look,
it's a matter of size and the offsetting benefits.
Right, but also, do you really want to put a 2-story suburban-style office building there with parking surrounding it? right next to the train station like that, that would be bad land use planning.
Okay. I want to read to you what you said to us.
But no, do you mind if I finish the other part too?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because you asked another part of this. You asked us, how did this influence where I thought of PCs? Mm-hmm. It has completely changed how I think of PCs. Because I don't think we can do better than that project in terms of a PC process. In terms of, and maybe we could get more benefits. Maybe we could do a better job on saying the amount of money the developer is going to make and that, but I don't think it matters. I think the PC process is broken. And I think that what's happened here is the community has no faith in the PC process whatsoever. And I don't really see how we can reform it. And if we can't reform it, that means we need to eliminate it. And so I would completely support eliminating the PC process.
So let me read to you what you said about the PC process 4 years ago when you ran
Sure.
the office to us. You said it encourages a landowner to hold out for the absolute maximum best use, which encourages neighborhood blight. Because if you're a landowner, you're sitting there thinking, if I get the right counsel, I can take it through a PC zone and maximize my zoning on this. And if this takes 15 years, so what? My basis in the land is really low. Whereas if you know this is the zoning and you know this is forever going to be the neighborhood shopping center, what have you, then the value of your land is determined by your zoning. What PC zoning does is it allows everyone to dream about what the value of their land is, which is a disaster. I hear you pretty much saying the same thing today, but in the meantime, what have you done to reform, to carry out what you identified 4 years ago?
So I am saying the same thing. And so the question you're asking me is, what did I do between now and then? Well, what I also heard from the community when I got elected, and remember, you're one of 9, there's no way I could have gone in and said, let's just eliminate the PC zoning. Never would have happened. Would have had no support for that. I don't think anyone suggested that, frankly. So what I heard from the community was that the benefits we get on PC zoning are false benefits. And so what I tried to do with the Lytton project is make sure we had real benefits and we addressed the community concern at the time, which was parking. And how do we get a parking garage built and to ensure that that building is fully parked? If we'd gone with a non-PC process there, that building would have not been fully parked and would have been grandfathered in on a portion of the site for not being fully parked. So I thought we dealt with the issue and started to, you could go further and now we've now decided we were going to have a financial analysis done of all PCs. We started moving. So I'm not saying, so we're moving down the reform path. And so I have now come to the conclusion that you can't reform the PC process because no matter what benefits we had on that process, you would say to me, Greg, but it was for 17,000 feet and you approved something 3 times as big. And it does not seem to me that you'll ever get a community consensus that it makes any sense. And so that's why I'm going to advocate to eliminate the PC process. I mean, I don't see any value in keeping it. I think it's broken. And I don't think we can reform it. I don't think we can build community trust. And I don't think we can get that. So, yes, I am completely aware. And, you say, what did you do? Well, I participated in the process and I made that much better. If you read my comments on the Lytton project, it's all about parking. I mean, all of it. It's all about how do we fix that. And I think that was the right thing to do. And in fact, you may or may not disagree, but I was the driving force behind let's take the money away from the affordable housing and put half of it towards parking. That's what we need to do. That's the issue there.
If we do away with the PC zoning, what proposals would you have for expanding or putting places in town for affordable housing, senior housing, because people point to the PC zone as having that value to expand?
Well, we see how well that worked out on Maybell. So, I think the answer is that the community doesn't trust it. And I think it hurts an affordable housing project to be under PC zoning. I just do. I think we'll need different mechanisms if that's the issue. But I think you need to zone. And it's so easy to say zone for what you want. It really is. It is a very difficult process to do that. And I think that's what we're going to be doing through the comprehensive plan. We've already started it. We've talked about we need to look at the zoning on El Camino. With the density bonuses and stuff, we need to basically say to ourselves, what do we want something to look like when it's built there? We don't want things to be supersized. But this is incredibly time intensive for staff. You know, they can't even get the Fry's thing done on time. I mean, the California Avenue plan's been out there forever. So to say you zone for what you want, and then we told, you know, during the comprehensive plan process, we've said to staff, we would like to fast track some of these zoning things. What happens with that? Staff comes back and says, well, it's an 18-month process. You have to go through an EIR on this. And you have to have public output. You have to have transparency. You have to bring in the stakeholders. You have to reach out. So zoning for what you want throughout the city, that's a huge, difficult job to make that. But I think that's where we're going on it. We're going to basically do precise area plans. We're going to say, what do we want? We'll look at it downtown. We'll look at it California Avenue. We'll look at it in Midtown. We'll look at it, you know, throughout the city. And I think we're going to move in that direction.
Just one more on the development sort of subject. You mentioned the comprehensive plan process. Do you feel that there are zoning changes that should jump ahead of that process? I know Councilmember Burt was pressing for some more action on trying to address some of the more concerning areas where there's greater growth potential ahead of the normal process of comp plan and then zoning ordinance changes.
Well, I clearly feel that way on the retail stuff. I mean, absolutely.
On retail restrictions?
No, not necessarily on some retail restrictions, but on fixing the ground floor retail. I've been advocating that for all along. So I mean, yes, I would love to see us move, and we can talk about ground floor retail, but I strongly think we need to move on that as quickly as possible, and I've been very frustrated on those issues. Yes, to the extent that we can move forward on some of those zoning issues earlier, I fully support that. The question is, you know, if it's an 18-month process and that, it's not clear to me you gain much in jumping ahead. And so it's, what are the practical abilities to do that, frankly? And so that's, I mean, in an ideal thing, absolutely. Whereas I know we can do the ground floor retail issues immediately, and I think we need to.
What are some of your ideas regarding retail and preserving the types of shops that mom and pop shops and service providers that people want to see in town, and they don't want to go to Mountain View, they don't want to go to Redwood City?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've been pushing to get rid of fake retail, to expand ground floor retail throughout the downtown California Avenue and other areas of the city, you know, since I've gotten on council, and it's been actually a frustrating experience, frankly. And I expect that in the next term, I will have the council support to do so. And part of that is looking at, you know, formula retail and understanding how we make that work. Because I think all of us would like to preserve your local hardware store, the cobbler on California Avenue, you know, those kind of. But I mean, it's not a simple process. I mean,
what's missing right now such that fake retail is able to move into the spaces that we used to?
Well, a couple things. I think I would advocate that there can be no conditional use permits given by the director of planning without it coming to council. I think that. I would also basically look very carefully, especially on California Avenue and other places, about service, personal service type retail. And I just don't think we should do that. For instance, the Lytton Gateway project, I took out the part about being able to have banks in there. In fact, one of the comments I made was bank is not a public benefit. I mean, I didn't quite see it as ground floor retail. That I think we actually need to go further. In fact, in the colleagues memo I wrote, I said we need to amortize out the Wells Fargo space on University Avenue that breaks the block. We need to tell them they can't run that as an office forever. And they've got 5 years or 6 years or whatever it is, but that has to become retail. And I think we need to go down a lot of places and do that. And then we need to expand. I want to extend ground floor retail, frankly, to Forest. And I think I think it's very hard to say, the formula retail stuff is not that easy, and I think it's very complicated. And I definitely want to look at it, but I think it's complicated. I mean, the way you make it complicated is you say to yourself, okay, so Pete's wants to come to California Avenue. Do we let them in? They're clearly a chain. So is it a chain-based, or do we want, you know, if a restaurant comes in that has, you know, 3 locations. Is that a change? San Francisco has you have to have under 11 locations, I think it is. So where you draw that and how you do that and what it looks like, I think that's very complicated. We have to do it right. And what we get out of it, we have to be very thoughtful about it. But I do think the more retail locations you have, the more you allow for the smaller, marginal mom and pop thing. And by marginal, I mean they don't make the money to pay the expensive rents, and therefore they can survive. You know, we saw that, and it's really frustrating. We saw that with Fresh when they first opened on Emerson Street. They were in the corner there, and then we had the shoe store there as well. Both of those got a clientele, started their thing in inexpensive space relatively, and both of them, one went to Town and Country, and the other one went. So this notion of incubator retail space in what other people might call marginal, I think is really important. And I think we have the support for it to do that as much as possible.
How would you prevent, on California Avenue, some of the trends that we already know about on University Avenue, and especially the preponderance of restaurants? I think the community in general would agree that you don't want to have California Avenue simply convert more and more of its ground floor spaces to more restaurants. How would you get a handle on that part of it?
I think it could be a conditional use permit, basically, but those go to council, not the director. And the reason I'm so opposed to going, frankly, to the director is for almost the opposite issue of what you're raising, is that I used to really like the Plantation Cafe on the corner there. And I think it's a great location for a cafe. You could sit outside on that big plaza, nice outdoor seating. And that got turned into an optometrist's on a conditional use permit. I think that was a mistake, frankly. And
Why did that need a conditional use permit?
Because it's not retail in the way they define retail.
An optometrist?
Yes. I think it's more of a personal services or something.
Have you looked at Menlo Park? Because I think downtown Menlo Park, conditional use permits are required for every single use.
No, I haven't.
I believe.
But that's my sense, is that the way you handle this is with a conditional use permit. That's, you know.
When the hotel tax came to the council to be put on the ballot, there was the discussion between 2% and 3%. You were on the 3% side.
I was.
Yeah, I wonder if you could explain your thinking on that vis-a-vis businesses and what they're contributing to the city's bottom line.
Sure. I mean, I think, frankly, that it makes virtually no difference to the hotels in town if it's 2 or 3%. I've watched their rates go from, $300-400 to $600-700 a night. I do not believe an extra, let me do the math, an extra $7 or $8, frankly, is going to make any difference on any of that. Mm-hmm. And I think it made huge difference in giving us the ability to implement our infrastructure plan, which is what I really cared about. When I ran in 2009, I ran on fiscal responsibility, I ran on pension and benefit reform, I ran on, fixing our infrastructure issues, and we have a solid infrastructure plan now. I just worry that, construction costs are going up, and I wanted to have that margin of that extra 1% so that we can do all the things we're promising to do, and that's why I wanted the 15%.
Do you think in general that the business community can support city services a little bit more robustly in terms of what they're contributing financially?
Absolutely. I mean, so that's it. I don't know if you remember, we had the infrastructure committee, and I was advocating strongly to look into this Mello-Roos concept. Because what I really wanted to do is I wanted all of the downtown property owners to pay for all this transit demand management stuff. And it's not simple of how you basically make them pay. I mean, there's no good mechanism to make it. So yes, I absolutely agree that they're not paying their fair share or paying enough. And I think they could easily absorb 75, 80 cents a square foot on all this stuff. It just doesn't seem possible of how you do it without going to a 2/3 vote, unless we're just going to impose a general tax.
Can you take us back to 2012 when you were vice mayor and dealing with the 2 Arriaga issues that the grand jury addressed?
Sure.
I assume you were present not only at the meetings that we now know that took place, but also in agenda planning sessions as vice mayor with the city manager at the time. Can you kind of...
So actually not really. The mayor did that.
Uh-huh.
And when I was mayor, I did the agenda planning pretty much without the vice mayor.
Oh,
I mean,
okay. I thought
so-
the vice mayor participated in those meetings.
Not
too.
really.
So,
you know.
what was it that made you feel at the time that City Manager Keene's approach to these two issues was an appropriate one?
What did I think? I actually didn't have that thought at all. You know, I been on the council 2 years. The way it was a horrible process. I mean, I'm not going to defend that process. It was like the worst process ever.
Well, and you've all
But
made
you
that
asked-
clear in hindsight. But in the
you asked-
moment, the city manager, an email goes to all of you saying, we're going to be arranging half-hour briefings for you with city staff and representatives from Arriaga.
So no.
We're going to set it up so that no more than 3 of you are meeting at a time. What goes through your mind at that when you get informed of something like that?
So let's walk it back a little to what actually happened. What actually happened is Arriaga contacted, I think, every council member, tons of community members, had a 20-minute meeting with them. Gary Fazzino came out of the meeting first. Sid was sitting there. You know, it was one-on-one. All he did was show you some plans and say, I'm thinking of doing this. Okay, you're thinking of doing this. That was the only meeting with Arriaga. He then went and worked with staff. And yes, you know, now that I have more experience, now that I understand it better, absolutely, I should have said, he needs to submit an application. I mean, that's where that went off the rails, is there was no public hearing. And you know, you basically figure that you understand staff's working with it. And yes, staff, I think we had, I don't know, 1 or 2 meetings with just staff and 2 other council members to bring us up to speed. But it was 1 or 2. And you know, it basically, you expect them to put an application in, you expect not paying enough attention, frankly, to say, you know, you need to submit an application, you need to do it, you know, and I gotta say, you know, there's really no excuse, and I take responsibility for it, and we're never gonna let it happen again, and I think we're instituting reforms in that. But it's easy to be a council member and say, you know what you want to do on a substantive basis. The process basis takes experience. It really does. Those are the issues that trip you up, and those are the difficult issues, because they're not what's the right thing to do. It's how do we make this transparent and open, and that's a much harder, you have to be vigilant all the time to do it. And I just say, you know, we failed at that. And we should have told the city manager, but you know, part of it is, I mean, I don't think anyone thinks that Yahweh Ye is not a transparent kind of guy. He is. And he was mayor, and it's not saying it's an excuse. You know, Larry Klein was excused from it. You know, frankly, we had the least experience of council in terms of those issues, in terms of running the transparency issues through. And I regret all of it.
Okay.
I want to turn our attention to the residents among us who are lower income, the issues of car camping and also Buena Vista. What's your take right now on what should happen with the car camping situation?
My take on it is that the ordinance should be, well, the ordinance is in abeyance, and that it stays in abeyance or gets repealed, one or the other. I don't think it makes a difference, frankly. I don't think we should go forward with it. I think the Cubberley situation was completely out of control. And I think we did a really good job of cleaning that up. I think we needed to do that. It was an expanding homeless shelter that was going to take over a community center that the neighborhood really needed. And it was expanding at some, you know, fairly incredible rate of the number of new cars that were parking there. And the situation was going to be it. We've completely solved that problem. I think that's to our credit. That issue has gone away. And I think we did a good job on that, frankly. And, you know, when you looked at what was going on at Cubberley, people were being attacked, people were being threatened. I mean, it was a real problem. And so I think the situation is good right now. I don't think there's any reason to go forward with a car camping ban.
So if residents are upset about someone who is parked on their street multiple days, maybe weeks, What would you suggest that they
Well,
do?
I would suggest that they would send an officer out who would talk to the person and try and, figure out what they're upset about and how we get it resolved.
I think that's the way we've
That's the way we've always done it.
handled it,
Right.
to the dissatisfaction of neighbors, which is what brought it before the council.
Right. But I haven't heard that. I think Carberly really brought it to a head. I think that I haven't heard much complaining about it since, frankly. And, I think you deal with the issues that are a problem. And I really haven't heard it.
On the topic of Buena Vista, assuming that the property will be for sale at some point, what do you think the city should do in terms of that property?
What do I think the city should do on that property? It's a difficult issue, frankly. I mean, what do I think the city should do? I think we should support the residents as much as we possibly can in terms of, hopefully it won't close, frankly. Hopefully they just decide not to close it and leave it at that. If so, we should try and figure out a way for the residents to stay in the community. And we clearly shouldn't make it easy for them to close the park, make it more financially attractive or anything like that. I mean, we clearly shouldn't do those kind of things. I think we should advocate strongly with the school district to go ahead and say those students can stay in the community even if they don't live right in the boundaries. If they move to East Palo Alto or if they move to Redwood City, I mean, I think those are the easy things we should do. In how we actually keep the people in the community or how we stop the park from closing, I'm not sure how we do that, how we stop the park from closing. The question is, how do we keep the people in the community? And I think we need to look about, can we give them preferences to affordable housing that we have in the community? If new affordable housing is built, how do we get them into it? On a development on the site, they should have preference. If there's a development on the site and there's obviously a BMR requirement that would go into that, they should get preferences. So I think it's those kind of things. We should just make every effort we can to keep them in the community.
Mm-hmm. Do you foresee a role for the city should the property actually sell? Do you see a role for the city in brokering any kind of development, any specific kind of vision for that property?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I see it as something where you bring the community together and we try and figure out within the legal constraints of spot zoning, frankly. I mean, I'm not sure. Also, I'm not sure that, the weird part about Palo Alto is I'm not sure that if you zoned it for R1, frankly, it would be worth anything less than it would if you zoned it R15. And that wouldn't help the people stay in the community. If you built less houses there, there'd be less opportunity to build some affordable housing that might keep them in the community. So I think it's basically a community dialogue about what we want to do on that site and how we keep the people who live there.
Well, you can't really do anything on that site and have the people remain there.
No, absolutely not.
Conceivably return there, I suppose.
That's what I meant.
So let's separate those out. And if you,
Or stay in Palo Alto somewhere else.
right. So let's just assume that the park closes, the residents somehow are relocated and get their relocation benefits. You've got a big chunk of land there that is undeveloped or is going to be redeveloped. What's your vision for that land? And especially with your past history with Prometheus and your knowledge of...
Now, Bill, I left Prometheus in 1991.
Right, but you know the development process and the thinking of a developer. I'm curious as to what you think this city should encourage for that site, either through the PC zone process, through a zone change, negotiations with the seller.
Well,
What's possible?
I don't know what's possible. I mean, I think you have a lot of issues. You have a strong desire expressed by the Barron Park community to keep the residents there. Obviously, I think this needs to be a bottom-up discussion that involves the community. I don't want it to be a Maybell thing where you come in and you say, we need to build 60 affordable units to house the people here so they can return, and I don't think that's appropriate. On the other hand, I don't want to say, let's foreclose that opportunity. I want to say, let's talk to the community. Let's do what we should have done on Maybell, bring everyone together and figure out what the community wants and how this intersects. And that's a discussion back and forth.
How does that conversation get started? How does that happen?
Well, I think we have to see what's going to happen if he's going to move forward with a park closure. And if it is going to happen, I think then that we basically need to sit down and engage the stakeholders and the Barron Park, homeowners and residents and figure out. And I actually intend to absolutely do that.
So you're saying that nothing can really happen until any appeal of the ALJ's ruling comes before the council and the council rules on it?
That's correct.
Okay.
I think that conversation takes place after that, and then the Gisser family say, we are planning on moving forward or we're not planning on moving forward. I think we have time.
This far to not move forward, but...
I assume so as well. But I do think you have to have that. Part of it is that the people that live there also have to have a sense, we all have to have a sense that it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. And I don't think we necessarily are at that point yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think time is up.